Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely terrifying medical mystery. All across the country right now, emergency responders are running into a massive crisis. Modern opioid overdoses are suddenly and fatally defying our standard rescue treatments. People are arriving in emergency rooms with symptoms that simply shouldn't be happening, and our absolute best antidotes are just falling completely short.
So why exactly is this happening? Why are our usual life-saving tools failing us? Well, the answer points straight to a rapidly spreading street drug that you've probably heard of called Tranq, or, chemically speaking, Xylazine. Its sudden explosion in the illicit drug supply isn't just some random statistical blip. It is an urgent, incredibly complex physiological puzzle. And today, using the absolute latest neurobiological and clinical data, we are going to solve this puzzle together.
Just look at this number. 25.8%. That is the staggering percentage of all fatal overdoses in Philadelphia right now that involve xylazine. Think about that, over a quarter of them. And it's definitely not just Philly either. Regions all over the U.S. are seeing a mind-blowing 20-fold spike in xylazine-involved deaths. It is fundamentally rewriting the entire landscape of the opioid epidemic as we know it.
It's totally wild when you trace how this drug actually got here, because xylazine was definitely not designed for the street. Back in 1962, Bayer actually synthesized it as a human blood pressure medication. But human trials were totally halted because it caused extreme blood pressure drops and severe central nervous system depression. So by 1972, it gets diverted over to veterinary medicine as this heavy-duty animal tranquilizer. Fast forward to the early 2000s, it quietly slips into the illicit drug supply in Puerto Rico, and then bam, in the 2020s, it just explodes across the United States.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, a dirty pharmacological cocktail.
For decades, scientists basically thought xylazine was a one-trick pony. They believed it only acted on one system, Alpha-2 Adrenergic Receptors, which is what causes that heavy sedation and massive blood pressure drop. But a totally paradigm-shifting discovery recently revealed that it is actually a double-barreled threat. It turns out it also secretly activates Kappa Opioid Receptors. This makes it what pharmacologists call a dirty drug. It's a multi-target compound that completely scrambles the brain's signals in devastating, totally unpredictable ways.
And here's where things get even more complex. Because of that sneaky Kappa opioid activity, biological sex actually alters how the drug hits the body. Female brains express and utilize those Kappa opioid receptors a bit differently, meaning females experience a uniquely harsh and intense physical withdrawal syndrome. We're talking severe somatic signs here, intense head and body shakes, severely drooping eyelids, all of which means we literally need entirely different strategies for detoxification based on biological sex.
Which brings us to Section 2, Suffocating the Brain.
Let's break down the absolutely terrifying math of this combination. When researchers combined fentanyl and xylazine in animal models, the mortality rate didn't just add up cleanly. No way. It absolutely skyrocketed to 58.8%. Why? Because they attack your breathing cycle from completely different angles. Fentanyl stops your brain from telling your lungs to breathe in, right? But then xylazine severely prolongs your breath out. Together, they essentially crash the body's entire respiratory and temperature-regulating drives.
To really wrap our heads around why this is so catastrophic for the brain long-term, we need to quickly talk about a concept called hyperoxic rebound. Now, normally, if you take an opioid and your brain starts starving for oxygen, your body kicks in this incredible defense mechanism. It triggers a post-hypoxic compensatory phase. Basically, it's a massive, rapid surge of extracellular oxygen flooding the brain to prevent cell death and restore balance. It's an absolutely vital, life-saving reflex.
But here is the truly brutal part. Electrochemical research has proven that xylazine effectively flips the switch and turns off that exact life-saving defense mechanism. When fentanyl is mixed with xylazine, the brain's hyperoxic rebound is completely eliminated. The drug actively blocks the brain from rescuing itself, which leaves delicate neural tissue in a terrifying, prolonged state of absolute suffocation.
And this prolonged suffocation translates directly into tragic real-world consequences. This explains exactly why survivors of Tranq overdoses so frequently suffer from severe long-term neurological damage. We are seeing profound amnesia, devastating memory loss, and severe cognitive destruction that haunts users long after the drug has actually left their system.
Let's dig into Section 3, Decoding the Zombie Phenotype.
I'm sure you've seen the news using that incredibly cruel zombie label for people using Tranq. But let's set the record straight with science. It all comes down to striatal D2 dysregulation. When users are seen frozen in those unnatural, hunched postures for hours on end, you have to understand they are not making a choice. This drug combo causes a profound dopamine transmission failure in the brain's main motor control hub. It's essentially an acute neurological short circuit, and it closely resembles the severe motor failures we see in advanced Parkinson's disease.
And then, of course, there are the horrific, bone-deep skin wounds. A lot of people just assume, oh, that's just an infection from a dirty needle. Actually, scratch that. The science tells a completely different story. Xylazine triggers extreme peripheral vasoconstriction. It chemically clamps down on blood vessels all over the entire body, literally starving the skin of oxygen. This causes systemic skin necrosis. That means deep, rotting ulcers can erupt on the arms or legs, regardless of whether the user smoked, snorted, or injected the drug.
Moving on to our final and most urgent public health mystery, Section 4, the Naloxone Dilemma.
Looking at these mechanisms side by side tells us exactly why our very best rescue tool is suddenly failing us. For years, Naloxone, or Narcan, has been our absolute miracle cure. It works perfectly on fentanyl by just knocking it right off the mu opioid receptors, waking the patient up. But look at Xylazine. Naloxone is completely blind to Xylazine's unique Alpha-2 and Kappa receptor targets. So the Naloxone sweeps through the brain, doing its job on the fentanyl. But the Xylazine? It just completely ignores it, keeping the patient locked in a deep, hypotensive coma.
But listen, if you only take one thing away from this entire explainer, please let it be this. Even knowing that Xylazine resists it, failure to administer naloxone in a suspected Tranq overdose is a fatal mistake. Why? Because remember, these drugs are almost always mixed together. The fentanyl is the thing that will immediately stop their breathing and kill them. You absolutely must still administer naloxone to neutralize the fentanyl even if the patient doesn't immediately wake up from the Xylazine.
So let's walk through exactly how to respond, step by step, because this completely changes how we handle emergencies. First, administer naloxone immediately. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, because the patient will likely remain deeply sedated by the Xylazine, providing sustained rescue breathing and advanced airway support is a must. Seriously, do not just assume that naloxone failed if they don't pop up right away. You have to keep breathing for them. Finally, clinical support has to involve aggressive wound care and stabilizing their blood pressure.
You're probably wondering, well, what is the medical community doing to fix this? And the scary truth is, right now, human medicine literally lacks an FDA-approved antidote for Xylazine. Vets use a drug called adipamezole to wake up animals, but it isn't approved for us. Yohimbine kinda works, but it triggers severe psychiatric crises in humans, which is awful. But there is hope. Researchers are desperately fast-tracking clinical trials for drugs like ENA-001. It's an agnostic respiratory stimulant, meaning it's designed to force the lungs to breathe regardless of what specific drug is attacking the brain, and it might just bridge this incredibly dangerous gap.
So we've seen how a failed Bayer blood pressure med from the 60s turned into a modern-day nightmare, literally stripping the brain of oxygen and completely resisting our best antidotes. Which leaves us with a really provocative thought. As illicit street chemistry continues to evolve so much faster than human medical research, what is the next frontier in reversing the irreversible? How will science actually win this escalating arms race? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.